The dark side of Hollywood fame nobody talks about from the outside. Hollywood looks perfect. The red carpets, the flashing cameras, the endless success. It feels like a dream. But what if that dream comes with a cost no one talks about? Behind the fame, there's a side most people never see. A side where pressure never switches off, where privacy disappears, and where the line between who you are and who the world thinks you are starts to blur. And the deeper you go, the more unsettling it becomes, because this isn't about a few bad moments. It's about a system that quietly demands everything and gives very little back. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. What makes Hollywood fame so powerful isn't just the visibility, it's the illusion that comes with it. From a distance, it looks like complete freedom. Financial success, global recognition, influence, opportunity. But when you zoom in, a very different structure begins to appear, one built on constant exposure, expectation, and control. At the center of that experience are individuals like Britney Spears, Amanda Bynes, and Macaulay Culkin, names that once represented massive success, but later became examples of how intense that spotlight can become. Fame doesn't arrive gradually in Hollywood, it often hits all at once. One project, one role, one viral moment, and suddenly, a person's entire life changes. That shift isn't just external, it restructures how someone is perceived, how they are treated, and even how they see themselves. And that's where the pressure begins. Because once an image is created, it has to be maintained. Studios, brands, and media outlets all rely on consistency. They invest in a version of a person that audiences recognize and respond to. But real people change. They evolve. Their thoughts, behaviors, and priorities shift over time. The problem is, Hollywood doesn't always allow that change to happen naturally. Instead, there's an unspoken expectation to stay recognizable, to remain aligned with the image that made you successful in the first place. And when that doesn't happen, the reaction can be immediate: public criticism, media scrutiny, endless speculation, all of it happening in real time. Another layer of complexity comes from the lack of privacy. For most people, personal struggles happen quietly. They're processed within a small circle, away from constant judgment. In Hollywood, that space barely exists. Every decision becomes visible. Every mistake becomes a headline. Every difficult moment becomes content. And that changes how those moments are experienced, because instead of focusing on resolving the issue, there's an added pressure of how it will be perceived, how it will be reported, how it will affect reputation. Over time, that creates a kind of psychological strain that's difficult to fully understand from the outside. There's also the issue of control. Fame gives the impression of independence, but in reality, many high-profile individuals operate within systems that influence their choices. Contracts, management teams, brand partnerships. All of these come with expectations, and while they provide opportunity, they can also limit autonomy in subtle ways. This dynamic has been discussed in various forms over the years, especially in cases where personal agency becomes a topic of concern. It raises an important question: how much control does someone really have over their own life once they become a global figure? That question doesn't always have a clear answer, because control in Hollywood isn't always obvious. It's not always about direct restriction. It can be about influence, pressure, and the need to meet expectations that aren't explicitly stated but are constantly present. And then there's identity. When someone becomes famous, their public identity can start to overshadow their private one. The version of them that people recognize, the one seen in interviews, performances, and media coverage, can become so dominant that it's difficult to separate from who they actually are. That separation matters, because without it, personal boundaries begin to blur. And when boundaries blur, it becomes harder to maintain a sense of stability. All of these factors, pressure, visibility, expectation, limited privacy, combine to create an environment that looks glamorous from the outside, but operates very differently up close. And that's only one side of the story, because the deeper you go into Hollywood fame, the more complicated it becomes. As you go deeper into the reality of Hollywood fame, one thing becomes impossible to ignore. It doesn't just change how people see you, it changes how you live, think, and exist on a daily level. Because at a certain point, fame stops being something you have and starts becoming something you carry. And that weight doesn't switch off. For many high-profile figures, the most difficult part isn't reaching success, it's sustaining it under constant observation. Every appearance, every word, every decision is filtered through public interpretation. Even silence can be analyzed, questioned, and turned into a narrative. That kind of environment creates a very specific kind of pressure, not loud, not always visible, but constant. And over time, that constant pressure can start to reshape behavior. People become more cautious, more guarded, more aware of how they are being perceived at all times. It's no longer just about living, it's about managing visibility. And that shift has consequences, because when you're always aware of being watched, authenticity becomes harder to maintain. Not because someone is trying to be fake, but because the conditions don't allow for complete freedom. There's always a layer of self-monitoring, a filter that sits between impulse and action. That's why so many public figures talk about feeling disconnected at times, disconnected from normal life, disconnected from genuine interaction, even disconnected from themselves. And when that happens, the effects can go deeper than most people realize. Take someone like Lindsay Lohan or Demi Lovato. Both have spoken, in different ways, about navigating intense scrutiny while trying to maintain personal stability. Their experiences highlight something important. Fame doesn't pause when someone needs space. It continues relentlessly. There's also the issue of relationships. In Hollywood, trust becomes complicated. When your life is highly visible and your name carries influence, it can be difficult to know whether connections are genuine or opportunistic. That uncertainty affects friendships, professional relationships, and even family dynamics. Because when everything around you is amplified, even normal interactions can feel uncertain. Who is there for you, and who is there for what you represent? That question doesn't always have a clear answer. And over time, that kind of doubt can lead to isolation. Not necessarily physical isolation, but emotional distance. A sense of being surrounded by people, yet still feeling alone in your experience. Then there's the pace of it all. Hollywood doesn't slow down. Trends shift quickly, attention moves fast. What's relevant today can be forgotten tomorrow. And that creates another layer of pressure. The need to stay visible, to remain relevant, to keep up with an industry that rarely stops moving. Because fading out of that spotlight isn't always a simple transition. For some, it's a relief. For others, it's disorienting. When your identity has been closely tied to recognition, stepping away from that recognition can feel like losing a part of yourself. And that's a side of fame that rarely gets discussed. Not the rise, but the after. What happens when the attention decreases? When the spotlight shifts? When the world moves on to something new? Those moments can be just as challenging as the ones at the peak. And yet, they don't receive the same attention, which brings everything back to the central idea. Hollywood fame isn't just an achievement, it's an environment that offers opportunity, influence, and visibility, but also demands constant adaptation. An environment where success and pressure exist side by side, where admiration and scrutiny are inseparable. And most importantly, an environment that doesn't always show its full reality on the surface, because what we see is the highlight, the curated version, the polished image, the moments designed to be public. But behind that, there's a completely different experience unfolding, one that's more complex, more demanding, and often more difficult than it appears. And maybe that's the real reason this side of Hollywood isn't talked about as much. Because it challenges the illusion, it forces a different perspective. And once you understand that perspective, it becomes harder to look at fame the same way again. If this changed the way you see Hollywood even slightly, don't stop here. Like the video, share it with someone who still believes fame is all glamour, and subscribe for more deep dives into the stories that exist behind the spotlight. Because the next story might not just reveal the truth, it might completely redefine what success really means.